Hey kids, welcome to Disney Animation Reviews. I'm Josiah Milky, your host for the show.
And I'm Jordan Milky, your co-host.
And today we're talking about my personal favorite of the classic animated Disney films, Walt Disney's second animated feature film, Pinocchio. But first, a little history. Even before Snow White was finished, back when people were considering it was going to be a flop at the box office, Disney's Folly they call it at the time, even before Snow White was finished, Walt had already started working on future animated films. Bambi was actually supposed to be next, but animating the deer in Bambi to move and behave like real deer was proving to be problematic. So instead, for their second animated feature, Walt pushed Bambi back, and what was originally intended to be number 3 in the Disney animated canon moved up to number 2, and that was Carlo Collodi's Italian story, The Adventures of Pinocchio, the tale of the wooden puppet who wants to become a real boy. From the start of production on Pinocchio, it proved to be problematic. If you've read the book, you'll remember that Pinocchio, let's just say he was not a very nice guy. He was brash, he was cocky, he was selfish, he was a wisecracker, a know-it-all. Overall, pretty bad for our main protagonist. After about 6 months of production, Walt actually halted production on the film because the film proved to be problematic. He said it's not working right, and part of that was the problem with the main character not being a very nice guy. So, they started all the way back over and reworked Pinocchio into a more likable protagonist. It was Disney animator Milt Kahl that helped give Pinocchio the personality we know from him today. He's a happy-go-lucky boy who wants to do the right thing, but he's led astray by all these interesting characters and learns what it takes to be a good boy. They reworked story scenes. They added in Jiminy Cricket, and he's actually an expansion on the Cricket from the original book. Because in the book, he's a minor character who comes to talk to Pinocchio to tell him, try to help him decide between right and wrong. Pinocchio kills him by smashing him with a hammer, and then he shows up in the book again later as a ghost. But with Disney, they decided to shape the Cricket into a full-fledged character to help Pinocchio on his path, and made him kind of a comedic sidekick. Disney animator Ward Kimball was the one that brought Jiminy Cricket to life. Truth is, Ward almost didn't animate the character. He was upset because Walt was going to have to cut a scene he had animated for Snow White where the dwarves sing a song while they eat their soup. Walt decided on Snow White that scene wasn't moving the story along. He told Ward, "I hate to say this, but I'm gonna have to cut this soup sequence." Ward almost quit the studio, but Walt asked him to stay to supervise the animation on Jiminy Cricket. Some of Ward's original designs, Jiminy looked like a real cricket, which was ugly, and kept reshaping him around, until finally, Jiminy didn't look like a cricket at all, and is the character we know today we know he's a cricket because he's referred to as such in the movie. Despite production problems, they managed to finish Pinocchio in just about 2 years, about half the time it took to make Snow White. When Pinocchio was first released in 1940, reviews were through the roof. Everybody loved it. It was the first Disney film to win Academy Awards for both music categories. Best Score and Best Original Song, in this case, When You Wish Upon a Star. Disney would not achieve these dual honors again until about 24 years later on Mary Poppins, and then again another 25 years after that with the early musicals of the Disney Renaissance era, starting with The Little Mermaid.
Yep, films from that era that won that honor were Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, and Pocahontas.
That's right. Despite the overall amazing critical reception for Pinocchio from the early days, and its 2 Oscar wins for its music, the surprising thing is that Pinocchio initially was not a box office success, not as successful as Snow White. Of course now, thanks to reissues, it's done a lot better at the box office, and has gone on to be one of the best well-known animated films ever. In fact, it's one of the only animated Disney films to get a rare perfect 100% rating on the Rotten Tomatoes site. So, now that I've talked enough about the history of Pinocchio, now's the time to actually talk about the story of Pinocchio. So in the opening credits, of course, we get our famous song, When You Wish Upon a Star, which has gone on to become sort of the anthem of the Walt Disney Company, and it's sung by Jiminy Cricket, who even gets a spotlight in the finished film as he finishes singing the song, and then he starts off narrating the story. How he showed up late one night in the shop of a woodcarver named Geppetto, who was just finished carving his puppet Pinocchio. Geppetto then makes a wish on the evening star that the puppet could become a real boy. And because he's brought so much joy and happiness to the kids of the village with his toys, the blue fairy from the wishing star decides to turn Pinocchio from a puppet into a real live wooden boy. But to be a real boy, he has to prove himself, and the blue fairy assigns Jiminy Cricket the job of Pinocchio's conscience, to keep him on the straight and narrow path. Even with Jiminy by his side, however, Pinocchio finds it hard to be a good boy. He's easily tempted throughout the film. He's led astray by all these really great villain characters. Some of them comedic, some of them dangerous, but all in all, they're really interesting characters. You have Honest John, the fox, and his sidekick, Gideon the cat, who first take him to Stromboli, the evil puppeteer, where Pinocchio is a success as an actor on Stromboli's stage, but then Stromboli locks him up to prevent him from escaping. Thanks to the Blue Fairy, Pinocchio does manage to escape, but then he's led astray by Honest John and Gideon again, and ends up going to Pleasure Island, where he and other naughty boys end up gorging themselves on sweets and doing all sorts of really bad stuff. But there's a penalty for it. They start to turn into donkeys. Thankfully, with Jiminy's help, Pinocchio manages to escape before his transformation is complete, and it leads to the final climactic scene where he has to save his family from the inside of Monstro the Whale. One of the things I like about Pinocchio is they're not afraid to take risks. Of course, we look back today and see how great these classic animated Disney films are, but even so, Pinocchio retains those dark elements. Of course, there are dark elements in the other classic animated Disney films, like the evil queen wanting to kill Snow White, or the death of Bambi's mother, but Pinocchio really kicks it up a notch. You have this little boy, this little wooden boy, who is tempted by all these different characters to do all these bad things, and it gets harder and harder for him with every temptation that he faces. And that's one of the things you can appreciate about this movie as an adult, is these risks that Disney was taking. But it still retains the lightheartedness that Disney was always open to, because he never made films for kids. He always said he wanted to make films for families, that we can all watch, whether we're little kids or senior adults. And that's one of the things I like about the Disney films, is that they're not just for kids or adults, they're for everyone.
One thing I like about this movie is, even though the main female, the Blue Fairy, isn't in the movie all that much, she really sets up Pinocchio's adventure.
That's right, she's the one that turns Pinocchio from a puppet to a real wooden boy, and tells him what he needs to do to become a real boy, and assigns Jiminy Cricket the job of being Pinocchio's conscience. And of course, probably the most famous scene in Pinocchio is the scene where the Blue Fairy shows up for the second time, and Pinocchio lies to get out of trouble, but every time he lies, his nose gets longer until the Blue Fairy tells him it's better to just tell the truth. Even though it only happens once in the film, it's probably the scene everybody remembers from the story. Another great thing that I like about Pinocchio is the voice cast. Coming off the success of Snow White, Walt Disney wanted some really great famous actors in Pinocchio. So Pinocchio holds the distinction of being the first cartoon film to have real celebrity voices. You have Cliff Edwards, better known as Ukulele Ike, because he was quite the ukulele player in his day, as Jiminy Cricket. Cliff Edwards just gives Jimmy this fantastic wise guy personality, and takes a nice contemporary twist to the story with this character. Walt actually, they originally auditioned adults for the voice of Pinocchio, and they tried to sound like kids, but Walt said, no, 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 no. No, I want a real live little boy for this character. And Dickie Jones, who also during that time starred with Jimmy Stewart from It's a Wonderful Life in a couple of live-action films during the time of production on Pinocchio. He was a busy little boy at this time. He just locks Pinocchio as a character. He's got the naivety and the willingness, interestedness in the world around him, and Dickie Jones is perfect for this character. Christian Rubb is the voice of Geppetto, and the animators actually redesigned Geppetto based on Rubb's performance vocally. Not a lot of people realize Geppetto looks just like Christian Rubb. The Blue Fairy is voiced by Evelyn Venable. Most people will probably best remember her as the person to have been believed to have been the original live-action reference model for the Columbia Lady, which is kind of cool. One of film critic and historian Leonard Maltin's favorite character actors is Walter Catlett, voicing Honest John. And Charles Dudell voices both Stromboli and the Pleasure Island coachman. An interesting story is that Gideon, Honest John's cat sidekick, was originally going to talk and be voiced by Mel Blanc of Looney Tunes fame, but they ultimately decided he wouldn't talk, and the only time he does talk is when he hiccups, and that is Mel Blanc doing the hiccups. And then the sound effects for Monstro the Whale were provided by Thurl Ravenscroft, who's done several Disney character voices. He was part of their singing group, the Mellow Men, who sang a lot in animated Disney films. Ravenscroft is probably best known for his voice as Tony the Tiger in the Kellogg's Frosted Flakes commercials. Some characters that weren't in the original story that show up in the movie, of course, are Geppetto's pets, his goldfish Cleo and his cat Figaro. They serve as like comic relief sidekicks like Jiminy, and although they don't play a significant role in the story, they're some of the first comedic Disney sidekicks that can help move the story forward in their own cute way. Actually, Figaro was stated to be one of Walt's favorite characters, that he actually ended up using Figaro in numerous shorts, largely as the pet of Minnie Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Jiminy is best known for being the first of many tiny but kindly and comedic Disney sidekicks, like Timothy the Mouse in Dumbo and Sebastian the Crab in The Little Mermaid. He also provided inspiration for Minnie Maui in Moana and Zuzo, the spirit guide fox, in the Disney Channel animated TV series Elena of Avalor.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, one thing everybody remembers Pinocchio from is the music. Like I said, it won Oscars for its score and the song When You Wish Upon a Star, which has gone on to become the anthem of Disney. It's a really pretty song, and there's been some really good performances of this song, but I have to agree that the original Cliff Edwards performance will always be the best.
I agree.
There are other good songs too, like Honest John's High Diddly Dee, Pinocchio's acting theater song I've Got No Strings, and Jimmy and Pinocchio's duet Give a Little Whistle, but When You Wish Upon a Star is the Pinocchio song everybody remembers. Like I said, I appreciate the dark side that Disney takes with this film. Like I said, they weren't afraid to take chances back then. Even though these films are animated, they still retain the dark elements from the books. Not only that, it's not just in the stuff they retain from the book, like Stromboli and Pleasure Island and the turning into donkeys and whatnot. They also really amp up, probably the climax with Monstro the Whale is probably the scariest scene. I would probably recommend watching Pinocchio by yourself as an adult before you decide whether to let your kids watch it. I've been watching Pinocchio since I was a little boy, and I have to say, I really do enjoy this film. I loved it when I was a kid, I'm pretty sure, and I still love it today. So, if your kids can handle it, then Pinocchio is definitely a great choice. And it's definitely a classic animated Disney film, and it's gonna go on forever, and I still love it to this day. So, let's talk about the home video release. Pinocchio's latest home video release is the Walt Disney Signature Collection Blu-ray and DVD release that came out last year. at the near start of 2017.
Mhm.
I have the DVD release, which unfortunately does not contain any bonus features, except for sneak peeks for other Disney projects at the time. But the Blu-ray comes back with a lot of great bonus features from the original 2009 Blu-ray release, including deleted scenes, audio commentary, Disney Song Selection, where you can sing along to your favorite songs from the film, a 56-minute behind-the-scenes look at the making of the film, very informative, and a music video for When You Wish Upon a Star performed by Megan Jett Martin from Disney Channel's Camp Rock films. And the Signature Collection Blu-ray features some new bonus features, including, in Walt's words, archival comments of Walt talking about the making of the film, similar to the one on Snow White, a feature called Walt's Story Meetings, where actors portray Walt and his story team and reenact some of the story meetings they had while working on this film. There's a sing-along version of the movie where you can watch the movie and sing along with the songs while you watch, a bonus feature in the Walt Disney Signature Collection carried over from Beauty and the Beast, and a long-lost Oswald the Lucky Rabbit short film. If you remember, Oswald was Disney's classic cartoon character from the late 1920s before Mickey Mouse came along. So that's the Walt Disney Signature Collection release of Pinocchio and its bonus features. Not much in the way of where else Pinocchio has appeared other than Disney parks and guest appearances on TV shows like House of Mouse and Once Upon a Time. They were going to do a direct-to-video Pinocchio sequel at Disney Toon Studios, but it got canceled. But all in all, again, Pinocchio is, even though Snow White was the one that started it all, Pinocchio really amped up the bar and still retains a classic to this day. Even with big Disney hits these days like The Lion King and Frozen, no animated Disney film in the world matches up to Pinocchio, and it's gonna go on forever. And it's my favorite of the classics that Walt himself made. Yep, so that's my thoughts on Pinocchio. Well, we're out of time for today, but remember, when you wish upon a star, your dreams come true. Bye!
Bye!